possible. So it took them a long time to open the door, but once they did, our fans were straight through that door, yeah.
Woo! And they're all here tonight, too, an amazing crowd.
Should we take any of the...
Yeah, we haven't gotten one yet. I think we've got some questions coming in from Facebook Live in a moment. But one thing I wanted to ask, Justin, you were saying a moment ago, too, about, you would have enjoyed it a little bit more if you knew where you would have ended up, right, and not...
Yeah, it's been stress all the way.
Right, but I think what's interesting about you guys, and, Alan and I were even talking about the kind of core 7 albums that the fans always talk about. You were innovating on every single one of those, whether it was Graham using electronic drums or Mike using the Mellotron or, guitar and bass and vocal harmony. It was always something pushing those albums forward. As creative artists, what was that like? Did you feel pressure having to come up with something new, or did you look at that more as a freedom that you were going to experiment? I've always been curious about that.
The head of our record company was a lovely man that we would occasionally go and have lunch with called Sir Edward Lewis. And he came to the studio one day on our 2nd or 3rd album, and he said, I don't know what you boys are doing, but people seem to like it, so just carry on. And so that was fantastic to us. And like I say, they didn't give us an A&R guy. All the rest of the people in the company were downstairs with a studio with an A&R guy that was just trying to get a hit. No, you can't. You got to do it like this, so it comes out on AM radio. Decca recognized that it wasn't our style, and the best thing they could do was just leave us alone and see what happened. And we made some mistakes, but we made some lovely things along the way. And I think that comes through in the music, really. But those first 7 albums, yeah. I mean, the pressure for me, and I know for John and for Graham and for all of us, was on the 2nd album, because we didn't have this angle of the orchestra, did we? We had to just do it ourselves. And we'd come here. We did our first tour here, promoting, supporting other people and playing in psychedelic clubs and things. So it was slightly different. The pressure was on, yeah.
But it was a strange time because we were touring in America over those 5 years, but also we made 7 albums in those 5 years. And there wasn't any pressure from us because we wanted to get back in the studio, because we were sort of, it was a creation thing that was sort of happening between us. And every tour we did of America, for me personally anyway, I saw so many new different things that I really wanted to write about, but not in a geographical or history thing, but from a way of life point of view. And I think touring America, and we were talking about our fans earlier. I must just say, I was traveling through the airport just recently, and a lady came up to me and said, "You won't remember me, but in 1968...
This could go lots of ways.
No, we were touring, and it was Thanksgiving on our first tour, and we had the night off. And she said, "My parents felt really sorry for you all. So we all got together and we invited each of you individually to a different home to share Thanksgiving with us." And I thought, how fabulous was that? 68, and in 2018 she came and said hello. I thought that was brilliant.
It was kind of strange, though, because we were all from England and we didn't have a clue what Thanksgiving was.
Nobody ever gave us a gig on July the 4th either. No. Strangely enough.
But one thing that's so striking, and I want to get to a fan question here, but you mentioned that the velocity of that period, and not just for you guys, but for so many of the greats of that time, when you look back and see the pace that stuff was coming, with the touring not stopping and with studio time not stopping, it doesn't mean now people, they take 4 years between albums, or they, Did it feel like a treadmill, or did it feel like that's what it took to keep up with it?
You know, in London at the time, particularly in London, there were so many artists and bands, and it's a very parochial period of time where we all knew each other. So we all wanted to show everyone, hey, this is our new album, listen to this. And I think all the bands were doing that. I mean, Jimmy came round, didn't he, one day, with his album, and it was just like that. Everyone wanted to play each other's new music. And it really was an exciting time.
That's talking about Jimi Hendrix coming round. My son, who's sitting right there, is grey now and balding. So what am I? But he had a guy he was a fan of, because he's a guitarist, called Lenny Kravitz. Lenny Kravitz? Great guitarist. But he says to me, Dad, look at this album. Lenny Kravitz admires this guy, and I went and bought the album, and it's fabulous. And he put it on and played it, and it's Jimi Hendrix, All Along the Watchtower, was it? Yeah. And I said, this is really funny. Jimmy, I was the first guy to hear that outside the studio, because Jimmy came round to my flat and played it for me. And he said, now bear in mind, I've been on the London Palladium, I've been on the television, I've been on all sorts, never batted an eyelid. But right there and then he looked at me and he said, you know Jimi Hendrix? Only time I impressed him. Still is.
So I'll read, this is a question from a SiriusXM subscriber, so I'll handle this one. What does prog rock mean to you? Because when I first became a fan, prog rock wasn't even a thing. So is it a meaningful, I know we were just having this conversation before we came out here, that everybody's got a different sense of what prog is or progressive rock is. Is it a category that means anything to you?
Well, we've been so many things. We've been glamour rock, I think, and
Psychedelic.
Psychedelic, yeah. That's the long word. Psychedelic, and we've been everything except rock and roll, which is what we are.
All right, we had one here too from Facebook Live. Elaine wants to know, what are your favorite Moody Blue albums in the discography? What are the albums that you're the most proud of?
Well, for me personally, all of them.
It is never fair to make the artists choose between their children.
I can choose one. I can choose one. It's the third album we made was called On the Threshold of a Dream, and it got to the top of the charts in the UK, and you can only imagine. I mean, I didn't have a stereo system until 1970, so I mean, when you were talking about why we would do it, we didn't have anything else to do. I didn't have a house. I was just paying the payments on my guitar and trying to do the rent. So it wasn't as if we had a life filled with other stuff. So we just wanted to play music, and we were doing gigs. But Threshold of a Dream was the first album that got to the top of the charts in the UK. And it was the one because our lives as young people was not to watch TV or anything, was to go to visit other people's flats. That's an apartment, to their flat, and to listen to music and get turned on. In my case, to smoke a funny little cigarette or something, but to enjoy music and to share music. And it was the biggest thrill I ever had, really, to go, because you'd look through other people's record collections, you'd bring records to them and turn them on, and you'd look through people's collection, and there would be On the Threshold of a Dream in London, and that meant so much to me. And it's a beautiful album, and I think it's the album where we really everything came together and crystallized, and we came of age as a group then. Yes, it was lovely. Yeah, very special to me.
Yeah, and also, of course, from that album, we started our Threshold record label because of that album, because we were on the threshold of a dream for us.
Kind of something I meant to ask from what Graham said before. You have been so many things, different styles, different categories or not categories. What for you is what's the through line? I mean, what is the thing that defines whatever it is that the Moody Blues remain over that time?
Melody and upbeat.
Simple and direct. That sound right?
Yeah, I think what's wonderful about the Moody's is that when any of us write a song, we used to sit round a table, we still do, sit round a table and one of us would play the new song, and as soon as you played the song to the rest of the guys, it becomes a Moody Blues song. And everyone then has their own part in that song. And I think to me, that's the success of our band.
Yeah, that's amazing, right? To think of 50 years of great songwriting comes out of a moment like that, right? We were talking a lot about the early albums. I wanted to just bring up and ask you guys a little bit about the period in the 80s when you're working with Tony Visconti, great producer, great guy, and putting together some of those fantastic albums that bring you to a whole nother audience through MTV, right? And you really become a popular band to a generation that may not have been familiar with those early records. What was that period like, making those and working with Tony and gaining that new audience?
It was a real turning point for us because we'd had an album that hadn't done particularly well, and critically we weren't being accepted as well. And then I met Tony on a project for the BBC, and I knew he'd be right for us. And he was a hero of mine anyway. He's producer of David Bowie and Hazel O'Connor and Mark Bolan. And anyway, it was a perfect fit, and he was a great player himself. But the records we made two real solid albums before Tony moved back to New York, which were The Other Side of Life and Sur la Mer. And to actually, for me personally, to actually have a hit, and a couple of hits with Wildest Dreams, and I Know You're Out There Somewhere, and to reach a whole new audience with those records, and to have that chance in life, kind of the second time around. The first time I was a bit distracted, or my mind was elsewhere most of the time. But the second time round, I enjoyed every moment of it. And of course, we had a big video with Wildest Dreams, and we won the Video of the Year award, actually, with the Wildest Dreams. And it's the first time in my life that I would walk down the street and say, "Where's that Moody Blues guy?" kind of thing, which was absolutely brilliant. But I think it brought a whole new group of people to the band that is still with us now, and is probably the core of our audience now. It was a wonderful time for us, a wonderful time to have success the second time around, and to be alive and awake and aware is a lovely thing.
If this makes sense as a question, what did you learn about the band in that renaissance, in that that other phase, and everything that came with that, and the video side, and did it challenge your sense of what the Moody Blues were, or did it take it to someplace else? It
had changed because two people had left, Mike Pinder, the keyboard player, and Tony Clark, the producer. So things were different. So we had to rethink. Well, not plan anything different, but it was a different group from that time on, and we were able to rise to that challenge for us.
It also came at a great time as well, because the first seven albums, were really successful. But we were still flying in the back of the plane, turning right, and sharing hotel rooms. But by the time the 80s came, suddenly the whole rock and roll touring had changed. And I think with MTV and touring, you know, sort of chartering planes and having proper hotels, and it was a different time. And I think that's where it changed slightly, and probably, as Justin was saying, it probably became a bit more enjoying. We enjoyed it probably a bit more then, from a different perspective than the early days. I think the early days were the creative parts, and from the 80s going on, we did get into an enjoyment part where we were travelling around, seeing a lot of people, travelling around the world, and it was a great time.
We had another question here from Facebook Live from Daniel asking, do you have any advice for fans out there who are trying to be musicians themselves? Any advice for young budding musicians?
You know, I have a 15-year-old guitar player at home, so what do you tell him?
Think very carefully about it. Because the only way you can exist is if you've really got to play whatever instrument you've got. It's the only thing you can think of doing with your life, because you're going to get smacked down so many times, and people don't realize what tender young things we are up here, because we were all over there after 52 years still quivering with nerves, you know, and you don't realize it looks like we're all confident. This is all a front.
I would say trust your own judgment and be yourself, you know. I was lucky enough when I left school to play with one of my own heroes. It was a guy called Marty Wilde. And he told me that he wrote his own songs, and he told me then, you know, to have something, you must express yourself and try and do what you think is right and trust your own judgment. And that's always stayed with me, and I'll always bear that in mind. And I think every young musician should try and find that inner character that they have and personality and try to express it. As far as playing a guitar, you really got to want to do it, because it's going to hurt. You know, it's going to hurt your boy's fingers. And
it's a commitment, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a painful thing. So people always say, oh, well, I had a guitar, but I didn't have any talent. It was all right for you. And I said, no, I had a great desire to do it, and it really hurt, you know. But you got to push through that, and I'm sure I wish your boy luck, because if you can play guitar, you'll never be alone. You've always got a pal in that guitar case.
I think I would just say find the instrument that you're in love with, because so many people take the wrong instrument because the parents say, play this, play that, and it's not what they listen to. A record, find the instrument you hear, because some people will hear the guitar, some people hear the drums, some people hear the bass, some people hear the keyboards, some people hear the violins. Listen to what you hear, fall in love with that, and then learn to play it 24 hours a day.
As long as it's not drums. Or saxophone.
That's a rough learning curve right there. Graham maybe just answered this, but another question from a SiriusXM subscriber. Looking back 50 years, if you were to do it all over again, what would you do besides being a rock and roll star? I just read them, man.
I'd
Starve?
No, you know where I'd be? I'd be in the Royal Navy in submarines. Yeah. I've only just thought of that, but yeah, why not?
Okay. That's the first we've heard of that as well.
First I've heard of it as well. Yeah. I couldn't begin to think of being anything else. Never could.
I just did anything not to do a proper job. So there you go, yeah.
Yeah. My father always used to say, a professional musician is someone who'd rather starve than work.
That's right.
I think there's one other thing we have to talk about tonight. In fact, Alan, you and I were talking about it the other day. It's so awesome that in the class getting inducted with you, we also have Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Incredible musician, gospel musician, guitar player. And Graham, you were talking actually, I think, to Alan a little while on Volume on Sirius XM, talking about that you had a chance to play with Sister Rosetta Tharpe back in the day. Is that right?
In about 61, we were her backing band in Birmingham. Yeah, I don't think we were down in London. I think no, it was in Denny Lane days, and it's quite amusing. Sister Rosetta Tharpe came, and we had our first rehearsal with her, and she sat on a stool, and we started playing as best we could, and she perhaps died a little inside, but she was very pleasant to us and sang a good blues song, a good blues shouter. And so comes the first gig on the night, and we do 4 or 5 songs, and then we do a dum dum da dum 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 da dum dum for her to come on. And this woman comes flying out the wings, cartwheels, gambols, doubles, all singing all the way. But we had it, and she was up and down and going around. I mean, how that woman kept a timing, a vocal, her words, and didn't break something, I shall never know. But apparently that was her sound and the thing she did, which I think Elvis Presley started to copy. I'm dying here.
No, but that is extraordinary, because just to say, people who, I think Sister Rosetta Tharpe is probably the least familiar to a lot of people of the inductees this year. I think one of the glaring omissions in the hall that she hasn't been in, but the impact that she had, and she came several times to England, and everybody kept, Richards and Clapton and all those guys talk about going to see her when she came to England, and the market.
She was on TV a couple of times, and we were all. She had a white Gibson SG, and that was really, really quite the thing at the time, and a beautiful guitar. So she was known, but on TV, but to a certain audience, to a gospel. That was her thing, But for me, this year, with Nina Simone as well, Nina Simone was my heroine. And I have heroes, but that I could always think that we could be like Buddy, of course, who's here, and the Everleys. But the real idols that I had when I was young were Nina and Nat King Cole. And I could never be like them, because I was a middle-class boy from the west of England. But I think it's a privilege to be just even celebrated in the same street, as Nina Simone as well, and a great influence, a musician, truly. I believe she lived in Europe for the last 20 years of her life as well. Yeah, so she was very well known.
Yeah. Well, I think it's almost time to wrap it up, but I did want to say it's an amazing joy to have you guys here, to see you getting inducted finally on Saturday night right up the hill here. into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and to welcome you into this house, along with many of those great artists that you've admired over the years.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
Tracy. It's a real
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you for the time this evening and coming out
Thank
to
you.
let everybody get a look at you.
Thank you. Thank you, boys.
Ladies and gentlemen, Justin Hayward, Graham Edge, John Lodge,
Thank you.
the Moody Blues.
Blues.